So welcome everybody, my name is Paul. I'm a country realtor in the western part of Virginia. And I specialize in rural property and farms, homesteads, and that sort of thing, investment, and also recreation areas like hunting and fishing and so on. I live in the southwestern part of Virginia near Lexington, Virginia. And today I'm going to talk about mobile homes as being a perfect place for a homestead. A lot of people don't realize that out in the countryside, in many parts of this country, there are a lot of mobile homes that are not in a mobile home park. Because what I'm suggesting is if you look for a mobile home that has its own parcel of land, that's the thing that you can look for that has a lot of high value, and I'll explain why in just a few minutes here. Mobile homes were started long ago, and they started out in the 50s. In America, people started getting these little trailers and carrying around and going to campsites and so on, and they got bigger and bigger. As you know, the Airstreams came along, and then finally someone got the idea that, hey, we just make one really huge one, and we just take it one time to this piece of land and leave it there, and a lot of the older ones still have the wheels on them. And so that was it's pretty interesting because they're not technically mobile. You see, because by law now all mobile homes have to be anchored down. And they went through a lot of evolution over the years. If you do a little research on the history of mobile homes, it's pretty interesting because I think it was in the late 70s, early 80s, they got into more regulations about the, the standards of construction and so on. And made they're made in a big building usually, and they're transported there in big huge trucks, and they're anchored down and so on, the new mobile homes. So in the real estate industry, mobile homes don't have a very good reputation because a lot of people, they don't take care of them. Some of the older ones, if they're 60 or 40, 50 years old, they pretty much have served their useful life, most of them. But the newer ones are really, really nice. I mean, what I mean by new, I don't mean like brand new, because those are very expensive. But if you find one, say from the 80s, 90s, still has a lot of really good life left in it if it's been decently cared for. And in the rural areas of America, a lot of times what people do, if they own a big farm or something, and then the son or daughter would get married, and they'd say, "Hey, look, we got carve you off 5 acres over here off the farm, and you can put your mobile home there." And people didn't have a lot of money, so it was a very economical way of having a home, and certainly solved the immediate problem because they can last for years and years. And if you buy a mobile home, for example, and you raise your family, and 20 years later you don't care what happens to the mobile home, your kids go bye-bye. So mobile homes have had an undeserved bad reputation, and frankly some of the older ones, they really deserve a bad reputation. And you see them in my part of the country where they have been abandoned long ago, and they're just slowly going back to nature. So the thing about mobile homes that gives them a lot of advantages is that the mobile home on its own piece of land almost always has its septic and a well, which are very important improvements for a piece of property. And if you want to have a homestead and you got yourself a septic and a well already, you got a well, you gold. You can grow a garden and everything, and if you have a septic, then you got your toilet. If you have a roof over your head, you have a decent place to live. And a lot of times people who are young people, like my children's age, in their 30s or something, they're looking for a small, easy place to live. And a lot of the younger people are looking for a place out in the country and homesteaders. So this particular video is addressed to those people who are looking for a homestead. And I urge you to consider looking for the mobile homes. Now, the thing about, you'll come into an occasion where someone is selling a mobile home. I'll give you an example of one I discovered some time ago, a couple of years ago. This guy had a mobile home, and it was on 13 acres. Now, a lot of people, if you live in a suburb and you think you got a half an acre, 13 acres is a pretty big chunk of land. And in 2-acre zoning, which is a lot of the countryside is out here, you can still get 4 or 5 good residences on 13 acres of land. Well, he wanted to sell this mobile home with the land for, I think it was $139,000. And the problem is that the banks don't want to deal with it. The banks don't want to offer someone like, hey, I want to buy this mobile home and can you give me a loan? The banks are going to say no, most likely. So that puts the people who own a mobile home in a very difficult situation because they have a really good residence. They have a nice, it's solid, it's decent condition, and it might have a lot of extras. That's another thing that comes with a mobile home in the countryside. It might have a shed or a barn or even like a garden or a garage or, yeah, an outbuilding. It might have a really nice fencing around. Because a lot of the people in the old days, a mobile home out in the countryside, especially in Virginia, we have so many small homesteads in Virginia. There's places in other places in the country that have that too, but not as many small homesteads. In Ohio and places like that, we got the big, huge farms and everything. They have corn and soybeans and so on. Out here in Virginia, we have a whole lot of smaller homesteads, and people are having their little country farm. Many of them have a regular job. They might be a tradesperson and builder, construction or something, and work in the industry. And then they have a nice little homestead with some goats and chickens and so on. And many of those kind of places these days out in the countryside are actually mobile homes. Now, the way to make a purchase of something like that is if you can contact the owner, by all means, do not just immediately say, hey, will you rent to own? No. They're not going to rent to own. That's the question they always hate to hear. Can you rent to own? No. If you make a contract with somebody, though, in a very reasonable way, if you can come to a conclusion that's like win-win individual conversation, negotiation with the owner of a property, like a mobile home. Let's say, for example, a typical mobile home, let's say it has, 500 square feet, to use a round number, 1,000 square feet at $120, $135 a square foot, $140 a square foot for a regular house, or even more. You're talking about for 1,000 square foot, you're probably talking about $140,000, $150,000 for a house. Yeah, it's a rough. But in a mobile home, you might be paying like $60 a square foot because the cost differential. And you'll, for all practical purposes, you see, you can get all the way to New York City from Ohio in a little motorcycle. You'll get there, but it'll take a little longer, or you can go a little faster. So you can go into a situation where you have a homestead already built for you, and you won't have to start and go inch by inch and clear your own property and dig the well and bring in all the construction stuff and all that. That's why, starting with a homestead already built for you is a huge advantage. Now, a lot of times, I sold a property, for example, that once had a mobile home and it had been cleared. It was a mess when I saw it. But I knew it had a great location, and I inquired a little further about it, and I said, well, that would be a really great place to sell, and I found a buyer for it. And once I got talking to the seller, I said, look, my buyer, he wants to buy this lot here, but you got to get rid of this old mobile home that's all crushed up. And so they did. Now, that guy bought a building lot on a beautiful gravel road with a farm next door. Nobody's going to build there. Privacy, less than a mile from a trout stream, with a septic and a well already there, and the electric post on the property already, so you can move right in with any kind of camper or something, and it was a recreational area. So $30,000. Now, if you have a place like that where you can immediately, even if you just want to move in your little camper, your pop-up trailer, and plug it in somewhere, then there you go. You see? So I encourage people to take another look at mobile homes, get out into the rural area, look online, and find out who owns a property. A lot of people who have a mobile home to sell, let's say, for example, by square footage, we were talking about that a little earlier, where let's say a mobile home is 700 square feet or something. We'll just use a round number. So technically speaking, a home that size, a real regular home would go for somewhere around $110,000 or so on a basic lot, in a real basic lot, maybe even just a city lot. It's not a very big house. In fact, it'd probably go for even more. But the same mobile home on, say, 4 acres, the guy might sell for $75,000. Now, if you can put down 25, or 20 and say, look, you say, I'll pay you off in 3 years. I'll amortize the loan for say 10 years, but I'll pay it off in 3. In other words, I'll have my payments. I can have a balloon payment at the end. You see, you get to work improving your property right away. You buy the thing, you immediately start improving it. Maybe you build a better home there. You can live in a mobile home, and you can get it, like I was using the example of getting to a distant travel. You can either go by motorcycle or you can go by bus or something, but if you have some low cost going in and you buy something that for all practical purposes, it serves the purpose of a household. It's not as expensive as a regular household. Maybe it's not as big and all that, but for all practical purposes, you have a home to live, and you can devote the extra money that you have to upgrading the household, the property. Maybe you can clean it up a little bit, and next thing you know, after the 3 years, when you want to pay it off to this guy that sold it to you, you say, look, now my property is worth even more, and I can confidently pay the thing off. You can do things, and maybe by that time you save up some money, and you can pay it off or something, okay? So a seller has an advantage if they can get a little bit of interest. You pay them, say you could pay them, okay, pay them 1% over what let's say the going rate is 3%. You say, look, I'll pay you 4% interest, or even just a little bit more maybe to give the incentive. Say, look, I'll give you a good payment every month, and then at the end, 3 years, we're done. I'm out. I mean, you're out, and I got the place, and I'll give you the cash or whatever, and we'll settle. And you can possibly make a deal like that if it's a win-win, and if you boldly come in there and, don't try to lowball somebody selling their home, okay? Don't, that's an insult. But there are situations where people really have to sell, like an elderly person they don't have any heirs, or there are situations where a quick cash sale for a fairly low price can happen. But I can tell you one thing about being in the real estate business, that there's a more and more demand now for those small homesteads. And if you find a mobile home on its own property and you buy that and invest in it, it can be later. I've seen ones that are they're better as a lot. If you buy a nice, beautiful lot that had a mobile home on it, and it's got a septic and a well, electric and everything's good there, and a driveway, maybe a shed and everything, and you buy that for $75,000, that's a really bargain, because it's hard to find even a really nice piece of property, raw land, for that price, 4 or 5, 6 acres. You see, sometimes a building lot in a nice area can be like $100,000 just for the lot. That's before you have, and that may be city water, and it may not be anything, no shed, no driveway, nothing. So, again, the summary is, get interested in mobile homes as a possible. A lot of the newer ones, they're very well made, and they look really nice inside. I sold a few years ago, it was only 3 years old. The people bought the furniture and everything, and you walk inside, you wouldn't know you're in a mobile home. Just one nice level. I think it was a double wide and a big kitchen and a little bay window, and they put a shed on the property, and it was in a really nice, beautiful 2-acre lot. And so anyway, thanks again for listening. I appreciate the feedback, and like and share, please. If you get any information, please call me. My name is Paul. I work for a broker in Moneta, Virginia. And the information is in my website here, and I do answer questions. Please feel free to call me. I'll answer any questions, and I also do a lot of scouting in the area. I know this area very well. I live in the Shenandoah Valley. It's a lovely, lovely place to have any kind of homestead, and if you love living in the country, then please check out Virginia. So thanks again for listening.